Many economists are debating amongst each other whether or not why Texas is growing the way it is, and has it been going on for a very long time, and will it keep going on? My name is Andreas. I am a master's student in urban planning, and today I want to discover whether or not the Texas economic miracle is real. So welcome to How to Build a World. Texas is the second largest state in the US by landmass, population, and GDP. As well, the land of the cowboys, F-150s, and the second best Mexican food after Mexico. For about half a century, Texas has been a driving force for prosperity, not only for its people within the state, but also for all of the US. The Lone Star State may strike you as a hostile wasteland, but in fact, Texas climate is formed by 4 seasons: summer, hurricane, blizzard, and spring break. The extreme climate has not prevented Texas from becoming the 12th largest economic power in the world. The state provides over 40% of the country's oil production, which in turn makes it the largest oil-producing nation in the world. However, oil wealth doesn't always guarantee prosperity. Fortunately for Texas, it has diversified itself into a host of other industries, some of which are very far removed from what you might picture Texas to look like. Today, Texas has the fastest growing population in all the United States, and there are many reasons why this can be the case. It could be mainly driven by the state attracting new businesses for young professionals, knowing that this demographic will help grow the future of the economy. Since the year 2000, Texas' population has increased by 6 million people, more than any other state. But this is just a birth rate. Additionally, more than 1.5 million Americans have moved to this land in search of a better future. For many, Texas has become the place where new Americans go looking for the American dream. According to data published by the US Census, 5 out of the 8 American cities whose population grew the most in 2015 are in Texas. This includes Houston, San Antonio, Austin, and Dallas. Furthermore, around 40% of the 27 million residents in Texas have a Latino origin. It is estimated that Hispanics will be the majority within the decade of 2020. This will make Texas the world's second largest economic Hispanic power after California, where Hispanics are already the majority. In the last 20 years, employment in Texas has tripled the US average. In the same period, Texas has created 1 million jobs more than California, even though Texas has 12 million fewer people. Texas is an interesting state for a lot of reasons. But perhaps the biggest curiosity to modern economists has been the many different approaches it has taken in running the state as compared to all the other states in the US. But there are legitimate differences and obstacles other states encounter that drive the point in showing that Texas is special. To best explain this argument, I'll be comparing Texas to a sister state, the state of Tennessee, 2 southern states with similar workings of government. But first, we need to address the special elephant in the room that Texas has, which is all that oil. Texas discovered oil back in 1866 and started pumping it like crazy at the turn of the new century, which conveniently happened with the widespread adoption of cars. From this point on, oil becomes synonymous with Texas as barbecue and cowboy boots. This remained a huge driver of growth in Texas all the way up until the 1960s, when all this stepped up a gear. The OPEC, Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, was founded in 1960, which was an international cartel of oil-producing nations. The US, and by extension Texas, was not part of this exclusive club. But that doesn't mean they couldn't take advantage of the artificial inflation of oil prices. Since all this worked to drive up the price of oil, Texas benefited because it no longer had to compete with international markets on price. This meant it was able to become the US automatic oil supplier, which was quickly becoming a nation that was more and more reliant on oil. More and more Americans were buying and driving cars while moving into suburban homes. This not only required a longer commute in said cars, but were becoming more energy demanding to operate. These reckless actions pushed the price of oil to levels that eventually became unsustainable even for Texas. This led to the oil crisis of the 1970s, which did a few things. For starters, it made a lot of Texans very wealthy by being able to basically name their price for their black gold. It also drove a lot of people to actually monitor how much they were consuming. This led to the average fuel efficiency of all cars on the road increasing by 30%. In isolation, this probably wouldn't have been a huge issue for Texas, but the problem was that this newfound fuel efficiency came at the same time with the shakeup of the OPEC model, as well as discoveries of oil in non-OPEC nations like Norway. This caused a crash in oil prices, and the debt-fueled cowboys of Texas were no longer able to sustain the massive growth in the state's oil operations and the overinflated real estate market. This hit the state incredibly hard, as massive layoffs, bankruptcies, and widespread foreclosures became commonplace throughout the 1980s. From that point onwards, oil production in the region suffered a slow decline as foreign oil just became more cost competitive. Texas realized that you cannot go all in on one hand. Texas had to diversify if it wanted to survive. But this all started to change as Texas became less and less of an oil state. It started to make room for businesses who were attracted to its otherwise enticing cities. The main reason being, for example, imagine you were a senior manager for a company and you had the option to live in New York or Dallas. If all things being equal, you will most likely pick Texas, since the price of a mansion is the same as a studio apartment in New York. In fact, Texas' location may be a blessing. The top companies in Texas are no longer dominated by oil giants. Sure, they're still there, but they're not nearly as influential as companies like 7-Eleven, Dell, AT&T, or American Airlines, all of which have operations all across the nation and the world, and benefit greatly from this central location without committing to one coast or another. This shift is perhaps best explained by a company that started to make this leap. Tesla is a company you would not think will work well in Texas. Well, you would think. But regardless, the factory that will be building the new Cybertruck will be located in Texas. This image change also extends into other industries you may not expect. Texas is currently the largest producer of renewable energy in all the US, despite having an otherwise limitless supply of fossil fuels. However, the embrace of new businesses and technology hasn't completely left the oil industry as a distant memory, but instead it has brought it into the modern day. Oil production in Texas ended its slow, decades-long decline in 2011 with the widespread adoption of a new type of technology called fracking. The state of Tennessee is located in the upper south of the eastern United States. The geography of Tennessee is unique. Its extreme breadth stretches from the Appalachian Mountain to the Mississippi River. Tennessee's geographic diversity has generated a variety of economic, social, and cultural patterns that has led its residents to perceive the state into three different parts: East Tennessee, Middle Tennessee, and West Tennessee. East Tennessee has the Great Smoky Mountains. Middle Tennessee has level, fertile land with gently rolling hills and having the state's capital, Nashville. West Tennessee is an economy based in agriculture with mainly flat land and rich soil. Tennessee's economy was mainly agricultural, with cotton, tobacco, and livestock as the main cash crops until the 1940s. The manufacturing industry did not grow until the 1930s and 40s, which was propelled by World War II. This growth was also driven by the construction of hydroelectric dams and power plants by the federally owned Tennessee Valley Authority, which produces a lot of energy for the surrounding area. After the 1950s, Tennessee's economy has grown mainly in the service sector. However, the development of information and high technology services has not been great in Tennessee, despite the ongoing support from the federal government. Earlier, I have stated that Texas and Tennessee are sister states. This is from my own personal observations living in both states, and it mainly relies on the cultural similarities both states hold. These states are agricultural societies that believe that the government should stay small, the right to bear arms is ever present, and that God created the universe not too long ago. These similarities aside, I want to focus on the first point. Texas and Tennessee have very similar views on how government should run from an individual and business perspective. Both states have no state income tax, and business taxes are very low or none. Then how come Texas is thriving while Tennessee is barely doing as well as the national average? Maybe it could be that Texas has 4 times the population as Tennessee, or maybe all that Texas oil. But it should be more than that. So let's look at what industries are driving the growth of both states. When you look between the industries, a clearer image shows the differences between the states. The 3 major industries leading in Texas are in construction, architecture and engineering, and administrative jobs. This makes sense from the earlier context. And in Tennessee leads in production, transportation of materials, and healthcare. However, when you look at the total number of employees in each industry, Texas has the most in administrative jobs, retail, and food services. Tennessee similarly has the most in administrative jobs, transportation of materials, and food services. However, it is still hard to tell which industries are established, emerging, or failing. A shift share analysis shows an overall story of the last 20 years. Texas has been killing it in the growth and regional shifts, while Tennessee is barely catching up with the rest of the nation. Sadly, many specific industries are slowly dying in each state, but it is more prevalent in Tennessee. These include manufacturing, farming, and information. In the regional shift, it is obvious that Texas is having more people moving around the state. People are doing their best to find the highest opportunity for employment and housing, unlike in Tennessee where most people tend to live and die in their hometowns. For sure, a stark difference. To drive home the point between both states, I want to focus on 3 key differences that does not include all that Texas oil: the real estate market, having top universities, and the tax differences. For middle and low-income workers, one of Texas' best perks is the low cost of housing. These workers have access to big and affordable homes, and this is the case because regulations in the state are very flexible, meaning it is easy to build a house for about the same cost as buying a house. This also means that even if you make less money in Texas, you will have access to better houses than the rest of the country. The same can almost be said for Tennessee, since for the last 50 years, the state's population has been growing fast, but it is still slower than the surrounding states like Virginia, North Carolina, and Georgia. Yet still, the majority of Tennessee is relatively affordable, except in the city's downtown areas, of course. However, not much of the population is moving into the cities. The real growth is happening in the metropolitan areas surrounding the major cities. They're growing and expanding faster than anywhere else in the state. Yet, the rate of growth is not matched with Texas. Texas has been able to develop one of the best university systems in the world. Even though it only has a population of 29 million people, 4 of its universities is situated in the top World 100. This education system not only creates high qualified professionals and high quality research parks, it also attracts investments from a lot of companies. Unfortunately, Tennessee only has 1 university that can barely make it in the top 100. Top companies will prefer to invest in states with a young workforce in the scale that Texas has. Barely any state can compete with that. Surprisingly, with the similar cultures both states have, it is the taxes where I think the root of the differences lies. Both states do not have an individual income tax, except when Tennessee, who taxes the 1%. That is very progressive. However, the biggest difference is in the business and property taxes. Texas has no corporate income taxes, but Tennessee has a 6% corporate income tax. In actuality, it is still relatively low on a business tax climate index, where both states have a similar rank from a business tax point of view. The largest disparity would be on the property taxes. Texas has one of the highest property taxes in the US, whereas in Tennessee has one of the lowest in the US. This allows Texas to make twice the amount of taxes per capita than Tennessee. In all honesty, if you did not know, it is the property taxes that mainly funds the Texas government. have you seen how big Texas is? Texas is also a state where salaries provide the most bang for your buck due to the lower overall prices compared to other states. People also have more money in their pockets thanks to affordable housing prices and lower taxes. Texas is considered one of the states that enjoys the most freedom, 6 according to Fraser Institute. This means it is significantly easier to do businesses in Texas than most other states. As a result of all this, businesses have been choosing Austin as a place to start a business rather than New York or Boston. Many Americans are starting to think the rest of the US should try to imitate Texas. But following my example with Tennessee, it really is not easy. The Texas miracle is for sure a real phenomenon that has been happening for the past 50 years. Yet, we can only wait and see if it will keep going for the next 20 or 30 years. And most likely, it will. Can any state do what Texas has done to become a world superpower? Not really. No amount of low taxes can create a success story when you didn't start with all that oil. But thinking about it, can low taxes help propel prosperity for any state? Theoretically, it should, but it will never be sustainable. The best thing that any state can do is evaluate its strengths and weaknesses, and hopefully do a good job in investing in important and emerging markets that can bring them to the 21st century. Thank you for watching. Thank you for watching my video. I don't usually do this type of video. This is my first time doing a video essay of some sort. I was actually falling behind on doing a lot of other videos that, I get to work outside, go to a site, go to see a building and tell the story about it. But I am still a graduate student who am on my last year and I need to work on all of my assignments that are due in the next month. So I decided to just make a video about one of my assignments, which is talking about the Texas economic miracle. I found this to be very interesting because, a little background, I'm originally from Texas. I was born and raised in Texas, and I spent many summers and a couple years in Tennessee. So I thought, I lived amongst the folks and know what they think and how government kind of runs, and I found it to be very interesting. I just wanted to spill some tea about Texas. Please like and subscribe if you actually enjoyed a video like this. I don't know who would want to watch this. Maybe some of my friends and coworkers, but please follow me on Instagram on How to Build a World. Not only am I a YouTuber, I am also a comic strip artist. Every Sunday I make a new comic strip about my daily life, and the comic strip is called I Just Love Buildings. And here is an example of one. If you think it's funny, please follow me. I make a new comic strip every Sunday and it's posted on my Instagram, and as well I actually put in updates on future videos or ideas for videos or whenever videos are being posted. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.